230. And then after the song, Arnold, would you lead us in an opening prayer? Thank you. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. They're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go. I know He'll see me through, and I am weak and poor, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their songs of sweetest praise drift back from heaven's shore, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
Lord in heaven, we're so thankful to be able to gather here once again, study another portion of thy holy and divine word. Heavenly Father, we thank you for each and every opportunity. Pray for those that may not be able to make it this evening. We pray that at the next appointed time, you may do so. It's thy will. Heavenly Father, we do pray for the ones that may be ill or in need of medical attention at this time. We pray for those that are taking care of them, that they may do things which may be helpful in their recovery. Heavenly Father, we also pray for Brother McCrary, his wife, and his family, Lord, that they might have success in gospel reading this week. We pray that they might win souls to thee. Heavenly Father, as we go through this hour, we ask that you guide us and that we take these things that we learn and use them in our everyday lives. In Christ Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
We'll start our classes now.
Well, good evening. Good to see each and every one of you here. I appreciate it because I need all the help I can get, I feel like. We've started our study in the book of Hebrews, and Buddy kicked us off last Wednesday, kind of setting the stage and looking at some of the background, some of the context about not only when the book was written, a little bit about why it was written, but also to whom it was written. Just a little disclaimer, whatever expectations you have about me as a Bible class teacher, I need you to go ahead and lower those just a little bit. And the reason I say that, I'm teasing, but the reason I say that is as I've been looking at this book, I think Buddy and I were asked to bring these lessons, lead this Bible study, I guess about 3 weeks or so ago now. And, the more I read, the more overwhelmed I felt. And I was reminded about the amount of information that is contained in the book of Hebrews, all of the points and concepts and themes and it's easy to be overwhelmed when you're preparing for something, and as a result, I feel a little disorganized. And so hopefully, as we go chapter by chapter, and I know we're gonna rotate chapters, Buddy and I will. I'll get a little bit more, I think, focused and organized. But even the first chapter, which is only 14 verses, as I've been looking at that and studying that, thinking about, okay, there's this, and then there's this, and it's just, even the first 4 verses, there's just an overwhelming amount of information. So bear with me as we get through this. Please interject with your thoughts and comments. If you disagree with something that I say, that's fine. I've never been much of a fighter, so don't worry about it. That's perfectly fine. Or if you have, an additional point or something you want to make. That's the whole purpose of coming together to study God's Word, and hopefully you'll get out of it what I feel I will get out of it in helping to teach this class. And they say if you want to know something, teach it. So, there's a lot of work that goes into these things. I know you all recognize that, and hopefully we'll both benefit from our study. I think most of our focus this evening is going to be in the first 4 verses. There's kind of a division in chapter 1. You've got verses 1 through 4, and then the writer kind of launches into this idea of comparing and contrasting Christ with the angels. And so we'll have some discussion about that, and we'll have some discussion about the roles that angels have played. We're not going to do, an exhaustive study about everything involving angels, but the writer brings it up. I think it warrants some attention, just so that we have a general understanding of why he's making this comparison and really, what those things mean. The first observation that I have from the book, and this came up when we were talking about the possibility of who wrote it. I have no idea. I'm not going to tell you who I think it is, because I have no clue, and it's really not relevant to the content of the book. It's an interesting discussion. I enjoyed having that discussion, but I will not be spending any time on, postulating who wrote the book. I think there were some great points made, some that I had not heard before, and so now I'm doubting myself, so I'm just going to leave it there. But the first observation is in the book of Hebrews that I want to make is the idea of, I think the book of Hebrews has a counterpart in the New Testament. what do you think, or do you have an idea of a counterpart letter or book that was written to a group of people at a location? If you had to take a stab of what that counterpart would be to the book of Hebrews, what might you say? Okay, I have a Corinthians, a Galatians, okay. I have a Romans, maybe, okay. So I don't know that there's one right answer to this. I would tell you Romans, and here's why. So Sam wins the door prize. No. We talked about who is the intended audience of the book of Hebrews, right? It is Jewish Christians, right? They're Jewish by birth, but they've converted to Christianity. They've been baptized for the remission of their sin. You know, they've obeyed the gospel in every sense, just as many of us have. And what, so what is the location that's at play here? Jerusalem, yeah, Judea, the Jerusalem, the surrounding area we call Judea. All of the communities and, this whole geographic area is where these people are physically located. What does Jerusalem represent? This
temple and, Judaism, priests,
Yeah. So, yes, those are all correct. It's the center of the Jewish world, right? And even within Jerusalem, it's the temple, right? This is the core of the known Jewish world at the time, right? Contrast that with Romans. What is Rome? The capital of the known world at that time, yes.
they enslaved the Jewish people.
Some, yeah. So if you're not Jew, you are a Gentile. It's the center of the Gentile world, right? And so that's an interesting thing to think about if you, when at some point we look at the book of Romans, whether it's a Bible study or something like that, it can kind of help you understand more of the context of the book of Hebrews, really who it's written to and why the points, the arguments that are made in the way in which they're made, because who we're talking to. And so it's interesting to think about those two books kind of being counterparts, opposite sides of a coin, if you will, in terms of who it's written to and the area and what that represents. Second observation that I made is the writer of the book of Hebrews, whoever they are, they get down to business immediately. There's no, hey, how are you doing? Hope everything's going well. There's no greeting, there's no salutation. You will find some of those things towards the end of the letter, but there's nothing in the beginning. There is a distinct tone and purpose right from the get-go, and the writer does not waste any time. They immediately launch into the case for Jesus Christ. So let's talk about that a little bit. I guess if you are in school, you are, let's say you're pursuing a master's or maybe you're pursuing a PhD program. At some point, typically towards the end of those educational programs, you have to, maybe for like a master's program, you've got to put forth a thesis, right? And you've got to basically prove that, in some cases maybe disprove something, but you've got to lay out the argument for why the sky is blue, right? And so you're making an assertion, and then you're going to spend however long you need proving that assertion, right? That's kind of how I look at the book of Hebrews. We have an assertion here. We know as students of the Bible what that overall assertion is, which is what? And there's not just one, okay? It's kind of a trick question, but if you had to say the main overall thesis statement for the book of Hebrews, what would that be?
Jesus is the Son of God.
Stand firm in the gospel that you were taught.
Yeah. Christ is better. Yes, all correct. It's different ways to say the same thing to describe the overall assertion that's going to be made here. And that is, salvation is through and only through Jesus Christ. And you could expound upon that and have a longer assert, because he is the Son of God, right? In all of the things that surround that. So the Hebrew writer immediately launches into this assertion and the support for that assertion to the brethren here in Judea. And we talked a little bit about why that was. What's going on? What do you suppose the problem or problems are that they're facing? All of the above, right? You can go to the book of Acts to get a lot of, I'm not going to say commentary, to get a lot of evidence and description about what's going on at this time in the church. Acts, in a way, acts as a commentary on some of the other things, and I think there's a relationship there between the book of Acts and what's going on that helps to paint a better picture of what these Christians are facing. Acts 7 talks about Stephen being stoned and those types of things. We start to learn about Saul of Tarsus and the things that he's doing. So you have a situation where at some point people are going house to house, shaking down households. Hey, there better not be any Christians in here, and if there are, you're coming with me. And it's not going to be pleasant, right, Sam?
This is where understanding the intended audience really matters here, because these Hebrew Christians have, in a way, kind of thrown away everything. They may be, kind of exiled and pushed out from the family because, they're not being a good Jew, they're not attending the synagogue, and they're not worshiping God in the way it's been done for thousands of years. And it's easy to be shaken by that and be tempted to just go back to what they knew before, especially if they don't see an evidence for why do we need to keep following this Jesus fellow. And the writer of Hebrews is really trying to strengthen their understanding by letting them know everything you've been working toward as a culture this whole time has been for this purpose. To go back to that is to abandon everything you've done thus far. So he's really proving that the old law and all the things that have in the Old Testament have a purpose. They were building up to Jesus, who is superior in all things. So that's really what the writer is trying to kind of address, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. As I was kind of researching, listening to different sermons, looking at different outlines, other people that have taught on the book of Hebrews in the church and their thoughts and ideas, one of the things that I came across, and I'm sorry because I can't properly attribute it to who was talking about this, was I'm trying to remember how he put it, but let me go back to my previous thought. So when you look at the book of Acts, it's not just the case, expanding upon what Sam was talking about. It's not just the case that, oh, okay, we're family members or friends that live in Judea, and you're still a practicing Jew, and then you're doing the animal sacrifices, but I've converted to Christianity, and well, we'll just have to agree to disagree, and we can still be friends though. I'll still see you around town, and that is not what was going on. What was going on was Jewish leadership was having none of this new sect that had risen up and was gaining steam and was converting people and was teaching things very contrary to the old law and what they were used to, and they were not going to have it. This was not acceptable. This was not a society where we are protected by, umpteen amendments with constitutional rights. The Jewish leadership of the day called the shots, and they were not going to have this be a thing. So much so, again, if you go back to the book of Acts and you're looking at those events, and Saul of Tarsus comes on the scene, they're putting people to death. Okay, they are not having any of this Christianity. So, keep that in mind when we're going through this book. That's what's going on in Judea at this time. Yes?
And we probably should mention that even though there certainly was persecution from the Gentile leadership and other people in the population, a lot of the persecution came from the Jews. If you look at places like Acts chapter 17, Paul is in Thessalonica. It's the Jews that chase him out of town. So he goes to Berea. They hear he's there. They follow after him to Berea. He has to then go on to Athens to get as far away from them as possible because they're not satisfied with him just being out of their town. They want to get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of active persecution from the Jews specifically during this era.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm trying to impress upon all of us the situation that's going on, and I'm certainly not trying to make excuse for the fact that these Christians' faith was wavering, but you can understand and you can put yourself in that situation. You might be questioning whether or not this is the path you want to go down as well, right? And I don't think that is lost on the writer of the epistle. I think whoever wrote it fully understands that. And we'll see when we get towards the end of the book, they spend a lengthy amount of time exhorting these people, because of all of the evidence that we have, because of what what you've been taught. Be steadfast. Don't give up. So that's really the scene here as we go through this epistle. Now, suppose for a moment that you are part of the Jewish group who has not converted to Christianity. You know that there was this guy named Jesus of Nazareth that some people say was the Christ. You don't believe it, otherwise you would have converted. You have some sort of knowledge, maybe different to varying degrees about maybe some of the miracles, maybe some of those things. Maybe you witnessed some, maybe you didn't, don't know. But given that, and then I'm gonna flip to kind of I guess not really a metaphor, but an illustration here. So Gretchen is a criminal defense attorney. She is defending me. I have been accused of, let's say, a capital crime, right? My life is on the line here. Let's assume I didn't do it, okay? And Patricia is the prosecuting attorney, and Patricia's got witnesses that said that I did it. Now, let's pretend like I didn't, and we know I didn't, right? But Patricia's got people that say that I did. What are some strategies that Gretchen could use, or that Patricia could use, against witnesses who are giving their testimony on either side? Let's say that that Gretchen's going to bring forward defense witnesses who are giving some sort of testimony, some sort of evidence that I didn't do it, right? I couldn't have. Somewhere else, whatever, they're going to testify to these things. What is Patricia going to do with regards to that testimony, to those witnesses? What are some strategies that she's going to employ? Yeah. She's going to attack their credibility. You can't believe what they say, right? She's got to try to convince the jury that's not a credible. Look back here, they lied, right? Or they're involved in shady business dealings. Whatever the judge allows in the trial in terms of testimony in what's fair game and what's not. So discredit, what else would they attack? Let's say Gretchen has an expert witness who is the world's foremost expert, according to her. We went in and hired the world's foremost expert on GPS technology, and they're going to testify that my phone was 3 states away and yada, 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 right, in my defense. What's another strategy that Patricia could employ? But Gretchen, this is an expert. This is an expert. Okay, to do what? To discredit what they're saying by doing what? I'm going to go after the qualification. That expert's not qualified to talk about GPS technology because they got a C back in college or high school or whatever the case, right? I'm going to attack the credibility and the qualifications, depending on the context in the trial, to convince the jury of my case, right? This is what you see happening when you look at, other text to support what's going on in Jerusalem. So I wrote down, this may be part of what these Hebrew Christians were dealing with beyond the persecution of themselves, thrown in prison, put to death, all of the terrible things. Jesus is constantly being discredited, his qualifications attacked. That doesn't stop. It actually happened during his whole ministry, and it doesn't stop after his death either. Everyone around them would have been calling into question his legitimacy as the Messiah, right? that would be his qualifications and his credibility. So both of those things are under attack. And the foundation upon which these Christians had started standing upon is crumbling, right? Not because Jesus isn't qualified or he's not credible, but it's their faith that's beginning to crumble under these attacks. So I like to pick out concepts. As I'm studying the Bible, there are, I don't know what you call, I call them universal concepts or universal truths, general truths, whatever you want. So the first one that I've written down, and you're going to hear me do this as I go through some of these lessons. It's just one of the things I do. I like to pick it out and commit it to memory because I think it helps us to understand the Bible and to defend what we believe. So here's the first concept. A message, or you could say testimony, is only as credible as the witness from whom it comes. Okay, again, a message or testimony is only as credible as the witness from whom it comes. That is a foundational, important thing that you have to understand when you are talking to somebody else about your faith and where that faith comes from. That's why I chose that topic Sunday evening, because it's so important to understand that. Jesus' credibility was always being questioned, even in spite of the miracles he performed. It still boggles my mind how you could see someone raise somebody else from the dead and yet not believe that they are from God. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. I think it highlights the power of social pressure and peer pressure. What were some people saying at the foot of the cross as Jesus was dying? He saved others, but he can't save himself, right? Even while he's hanging on the cross, his credibility is being attacked, right? And in their minds, if this were the Son of God, he would not be hanging here dying, right? In their minds, obviously, he's not. Now, you get to Acts 2, many of those people have changed their mind, and now they're the ones being written to in the book of Hebrews, right? But at the time, even then, his questionability, or his credibility and his qualifications are still under attack. There's no doubt in my mind that the Hebrew writer begins the letter in this way to reestablish in the minds of his readers both the absolute credibility and qualifications of Jesus. True or false? Jesus stands alone with regards to both his credibility and his qualifications. What are some of his qualifications? True, yes. He's the Son of God, okay?
The one that Scriptures reveal, the Old Testament.
Yeah. He was prophesied, though he's the one, right? The one that began in Genesis 3. Chapter 1 argues that Christ is superior to the angels. That's part of it. First century Christians would have been very familiar with angels and demons, for that matter, the spiritual beings, both good and bad, through the story of Christ's resurrection and the role that angels played in that. So we do have, and we're not going to go into that in detail, but you can go read the account of Jesus' resurrection, the role that angels played in that on several different occasions. I want to start tonight looking at the first 4 verses of Hebrews chapter 1. Somebody please read the first 4 verses.
In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he also made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. So he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs.
What translation is that?
It's NIV.
Okay. In order to discover what the inspired writer is saying, there are some questions that we need to ask ourselves concerning the first 4 verses. We're not going to get through all of these tonight. That's fine. I didn't plan on it. But I think there are 12 questions that need to be answered right from the outset before we launch into the rest of the chapter and the rest of the book. The first question is, what does the writer mean by times past? Or your translation may say sundry times, various times. What is meant by that?
Well, he's hearkening back to a lot of, I think, the Old Testament examples that are recorded, where God speaks to people in various ways, whether it's through a prophet or through direct communication. Like Moses and Abraham spoke to God as one speaks to a friend. But then you had some of the kings have prophets come to them with messages from God, cases such as that.
Yeah. So I think we're probably all familiar, maybe not. I don't want to assume, but the way in which God has chosen to communicate with man falls into how many broad categories? I'll give you a hint. We call them dispensations. How? 3, yeah. We recognize 3 dispensations. These are periods of time in which God communicated through certain ways. So the first dispensation is, how was that done? Okay. It was very direct to the patriarchs, heads of the family. And there are examples of that. You can see that. We come to the next dispensation, and what do we see there? Prophets. Yeah, and just a point of interest. The first dispensation is, to me, one of the most interesting when you're just looking at the various ways part of that first verse. I mean, so burning bush, right? That's right. Writing a hand appearing and writing on a wall. Dreams, visions. There's a lot more that I don't have listed, but you have all of these ways in which God communicated to people in that dispensation. Second dispensation, prophets, is the most common. The old law that was given, through Moses, through the appointed leaders of the nation of Israel. Verse 2, I don't want to make sure I don't get ahead of myself. So times past is referring to simply periods where God, before Jesus was born, earthly, and ministered and preached, it's talking about before that. And there are different ways before that this happened, buddy.
I guess there's one thing, when I read this, I kind of think about the process. A lot of times when you're having a discussion with people and trying to get them on board with where you're at,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of want to find common ground first. I think when the writer writes to the Jewish Christians, in times past, God spoke to the fathers and the prophets. They're shaking their head. Yep,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Then he comes in these times, he spoke to Jesus, and it's like, wait a minute, I think you see, he's trying to develop that, or in a way, I don't necessarily think that he has to develop that common ground in this situation. He's talking to Christians,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he is wanting to make sure that he gets on solid ground with them to begin with, and then going into the superiority of Christ.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sam.
And kind of going off of what Buddy is saying, certainly they would understand these Old Testament concepts, given his intended audience here. So in that way, there's no doubt, but he's also trying to then move on from that to say, this is what we've progressed to, this is what we've advanced to. Here's what's different.
Yeah.
So he is providing that contrast as well. And having that context is important because a lot of times, and this would not probably have been as big a problem in the initial writing for the initial audience. A lot of people will look at verses like verse 2 and say, oh, these last days, the last times, the last age, depending on some of your translations will vary. And they'll think apocalyptic, judgment day, this is, in the last days, this is going to happen, this is a sign. That's not what this means.
Yeah.
Because people will look at that phrase and just get the context messed up. He's talking about the last time as in, he talked about the dispensations. This is the final one. It is the ultimate one. There's not going to be anything coming in afterward, after Jesus changing things, adding things, or, saying just kidding about that, let's do this instead. And a lot of what, mankind's religion gets in trouble with is trying to do that very thing, is saying, oh yeah, Jesus was right about this, but then we want to add this also, or we need to make some changes or adjustments to whatever doctrine came with Jesus in the New Testament. That's where John writes about that in Revelation also, the dangers of doing that. And Peter especially writes about false prophets. They write about warning of false messiahs. He says, don't pay any attention to them. There's nothing else coming. This is the most, not just superior, but is the ultimate in the literal sense. There's nothing else coming. This is the final thing.
Yeah, and I think the Hebrew writer does a masterful job, inspired, laying the case to support that. How could anything better come than what has already come? Jesus was the what begotten Son. He's the only child of God. There is no other person who's going to be more qualified, right? And the writer's going to spend chapter upon chapter here, really the first 4.5 chapters, making that case. There is no other qualified person beyond the Son of God. That was it, right? Real quickly, when did that last age or these last days begin? I would make the argument when Jesus came and began his ministry. And the reason I say that is because he's spoken unto us by his Son. So Jesus preached, taught, debated here on earth during his ministry. I don't think it's wrong to say that it began in Acts 2 necessarily. And I don't want to split hairs on that, but I would make the argument it began when Jesus began his ministry. Question 2, we kind of have already answered here. What does the inspired writer mean by partial or various ways? We talked about that. God has always revealed, spoken to in some fashion, whether it was verbal or not. He's always spoken or revealed things to man in different ways. But in these last days, it's by and through his Son, the gospel, the inspired word that we have, which is all based upon the teachings of Jesus. I think we have a few more minutes here. What is a prophet, and how did the prophets speak to our ancestors? Again, we've already touched on this a little bit. What's a prophet?
Someone who explains God's word, God's intentions and will to you.
Okay, why can anybody just say, hey, I'm a prophet? They do, but that doesn't make it so. What makes it so? Okay. They received direct revelation in some way from God. A lot of times that was in a vision. A lot of times that was directly, God said, tell my people this, right? And they would go and do that. That's what qualifies you as a prophet, is that you have had a miraculous revelation to you by God. Do we have prophets today?
Supposedly not.
Living on earth?
Not in the way we have in the Old Testament.
Right.
We see examples of this in, I think Jeremiah is a good example, where you have an actual prophet of God who is receiving those messages, and then you have false prophets who are also running around saying the exact opposite, and you get to find out who was right all the time. And they still didn't like his message, but Jeremiah clearly is the one who has the correct message.
Yes. Okay, great. The fourth question, I think we already talked about this. What is meant by final days? We're talking about the last dispensation, which we are still in. True or false? True, yes. We are in the last days. The last days have been going on since the death of Christ, the beginning of the church, right? Christ's ministry and on. That's a long time to us, not to God. 2024 years, that's a good chunk of time to us from our perspective. But we are in the last days. To Sam's point, there's not another dispensation coming after this. There's never any mention about anything coming after the last days. I had a friend argue with me one time that he believed that the Bible picks up where evolution left off, trying to somehow reconcile the Bible and science in some harmonious way. And I pointed out to him, I said, now, do you believe the first verse of the Bible? We talked about the Bible being inspired and all that. Yeah, okay. And then we sat down and we read the first verse, and it said, in the beginning. And I was trying to get him to understand that means there was nothing before. You cannot, they don't fit. So it's the same then as it is now. If something is the last, there's nothing after it, right? So, kind of common sense, hopefully things. I think this is a great place to stop. We got through 4 of those questions, so we'll pick up with the other questions. If you want to be looking at those, question 5, who is the Son? Question 6, how was the Son involved in creation? 7 is the question of Why is the Son the heir? What does that mean in terms of inheritance? What does that title mean to us? How is the Son the brilliance or radiance of God's glory? What does it mean? How does the Son bear the impression of or imprint? King James says the express image of the Father's being. What does that mean? How does he sustain all things through his word? How has the Son purged away sins and taken a seat at God's right hand? What does that mean? And is there any significance to God or to Jesus being at the right hand of God? And then, what was the role of the angels and how is the Son superior to them, which will kind of catapult us into the rest of the chapter. Comments or questions up to this point? Yes.
Is there some place in the Bible where it actually talks about the angels? And, like we all say, Satan was a fallen angel and all that. Where is all that?
I don't.
If I'm going to look into what an angel is, I don't want to be looking in Wikipedia, you know?
Right. Thank you for.
I mean, I'll go there too, maybe, since maybe they'll give me a reference.
Sure,
to the Bible,
sure.
who knows?
I understand what you mean. So the answer is I don't know where that collective information is. I know there's a lot of symbolism and things contained in John's vision in the book of Revelation.
Right.
We can debate about how much of that is literal versus
But
a
I don't
vision.
believe, I've studied Revelation a couple of times
Yeah.
in the last 6 months, and I don't know that there's anywhere in there, even symbolically, that it actually talks about Satan being a fallen angel. So I'm trying to figure out if anybody knows where that comes from.
The Bible does not say Satan used to be an angel and now he's the devil. There are passages that allude to that we can kind of infer that must have been the case. It really kind of takes you down a study not only of angels but of these spiritual beings who have always existed. They're not man. They're not divine. You have angels, you have demons, sometimes referred to as unclean spirits, and that's kind of a whole study to itself. It's very interesting, I think, but I can't tell you off the top of my head like where are the best passages to go to learn about angels, who they are, what their purpose was. We'll talk about some of that as we go through chapter 1. That might help a little bit, but yeah. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Buddy, do you have an invitation song? 3:15, okay. I appreciate your kind attention. I'm fully aware that I tend to ramble, so I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum. I get kind of excited when we get on certain topics, and I think it's interesting to me to study these things and talk about them and kind of dig into the meat of God's Word and particularly this book. So I appreciate your kind attention. By way of invitation, we'll be talking about, Buddy and I, we'll be talking about the case for Jesus, right? That's what the book of Hebrews does. It's laying the case for Jesus being the path to salvation. And I think it's every bit as relevant to us today as it was to these first century Christians who had all of these challenges. Thank goodness thank goodness that we don't have the same challenges that they do. I hope that we never do. We're so blessed with the country that we live in, even though surrounded by, you know, all manner of evil and ungodliness and things like that. We don't have the same pressures and threats that they faced. But even so, we do still have pressure, temptation, challenges. I didn't do a good job Sunday evening of talking about it, but that's where our faith plays such an important role in our salvation. And it's something that we've got to continually nurture and feed. And, you know, it's like the okra that Gretchen's growing. If she doesn't go pick it, it's no good. There's something she has to do to nurture that plant, that crop, for it to be good. Particularly, you've got to pick it at just the right time. And all that, if you ever grown okra, I've grown it once. It was really good. I've never tried it again because you can't let it go. You have to continually pay attention to that plant and pay it attention every single day in very specific ways. So our faith is the same. And so the invitation is to those who have not been baptized, or to those who have and, you know, maybe are struggling, to let us help you. There's people here that want to help you maintain your faith, grow your faith, and be in a right relationship with God. So if you need that, if you need the prayers or help in any way, let's do that. Come forward as we stand and sing.
Oh, do not let the word depart, and close thine eyes against the light. For sin, harden not thy heart. Be saved, oh, tonight. Oh, why not tonight? Oh, why not tonight? Wilt thou be saved? Then why not tonight? Tomorrow's sun may never rise to bless thy long deluded sight. This is the time, oh, then be wise. Be saved, oh, tonight. Oh, why not tonight? Oh, why not tonight? Wilt thou be saved? Then why not tonight? Our blessed Lord refuses none who would to him their souls unite. Believe, obey, the work is done. Be saved, oh, tonight. Oh, why not tonight? Oh, why not tonight?